Used. This is what's happening. As of April 18, 2025, both the Atlantic and Pacific have been turned into silent battlegrounds. The U.S. Navy is conducting direct, coordinated, and aggressive lockdowns of two of the major coasts, not for defense, but for capture. This is part of a retaliation against deeply embedded network of elite criminal operations that ran undisturbed for decades. These aren't pirates or rogue traffickers. What's being intercepted, bordered, and dismantled are full-scale smuggling operations directly linked to billionaire financiers, intelligence operatives, and foreign dignitaries. Trafficking of children, movement of classified stolen technology, gold extraction, mobile servers, and elite fugitives. This is the cargo that's being seized. This is what's being hidden under the cover of international shipping. The Navy isn't targeting nations. They're targeting individuals, powerful names protected for years by corrupt agencies and black budget programs. But that protection is now gone. These ships aren't just being stopped, they're being vanished, seized, their contents uploaded directly to military cyber command and naval intelligence. We must learn before the greatest wealth transfer in history reclaims money from the elites and returns it to us. It's a cleanup operation on Trump's direct authority. This is happening because Trump is back in full command. The civilian show is over. The shadow war that's been unfolding beneath the surface since 2021 has moved into direct confrontation. Military tribunals are active. Gitmo has been expanded, not shut down. The emergency broadcast system is tested and ready, and now the sea roads, the final remaining lifeline for escape, are being surgically cut. Ships guised as private yachts and luxury liners have been intercepted. Many were headed for deep-sea drop points near the Caribbean islands where submarines were waiting for them. These weren't just random rich people. Inside, military teams have uncovered trafficking victims and encryption hubs tied to foreign intelligence and DNA evidence connected to missing persons databases that were thought to be scrubbed and lost. These vessels weren't just transporting people. Some contaminated unmarked crates of what appeared to be bioweapons developed in rogue labs in the Pacific outside U.S. jurisdiction now backtracked to DARPA offshoots and WHO contractors, World Health Organization contractors. Others carried massive gold bars stamped with central bank seals believed to be part of the stolen global wealth rerouted during the 2008 financial collapse and laundered through the IMF shell companies. Atlantic seizures reveal Epstein's 2.0 and new trafficking routes. On the East Coast, carrier strike groups have intercepted vessels departing from ports in South Florida and Georgia heading towards international waters near the elite-owned Caribbean islands. What naval boarding teams found is nothing short of horrifying. One vessel registered under a shell company based in Luxembourg was outfitted with a below-deck surgical room, soundproof chambers, biometric scanners, and encrypted communications equipment. The women and children found on board were unregistered, no birth records, no identities, and no trace. DNA tests have matched some of the victims to missing children from Child Protective Services cases across the multiple U.S. states. What's more explosive, one server pulled from the vessel contained a database mapping over 600 trafficking routes used since 2012 involving ports in Italy, the Netherlands, the UK, and Israel. Many of these ships were funded through charity organizations with ties to former Clinton Foundation donors. The Epstein network never died. It simply evolved. It moved to the sea and now has been caught red-handed. Pacific Zone deep state exfiltration shut down. While the Atlantic is being purged of Epstein-style trafficking vessels, the Pacific has become a war zone for globalist extraction routes. Submarines have been deployed in record numbers, and they aren't hunting enemy nations. They're intercepting elite-run covert escape vehicles, attempting to smuggle intel currency and bioengineered materials to Australia and Southeast Asia. Naval intelligence intercepted a high-tech submersible registered to a pharmaceutical research foundation operating out of San Diego. Folks, if you hadn't hit the like side and the subscribe button, please do that right now. You're not going to get this information anywhere else, especially without commercials. The sub was carrying experimental compounds believed to be precursors for aerosolized behavioral control agents. Alongside it, crates filled with military-grade night vision and encrypted tablets detailing logistical plans for setting up offshore medical camps beyond civilian oversight. These were not scientists. These were contractors, former CIA, former UN peacekeeping members, and one ex-World Economic Forum consultant, all using fake identities. This wasn't a mission of research. It was preparation for the post-collapse recollection, and population control. Knowledge is the key that unlocks all doors. Now you know what's going on. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense just keeps delivering for the American people. President Trump said to lock down the border, and we are. Troops can now detain, search people on newly minted military land on the border. Trump's mass deportation raids result in 655% spike in arrests of terrorists roaming U.S., including one of India's most wanted. The Trump administration's mass deportation raids have nabbed more than 200 known or suspected terrorists since January, including one of India's most wanted, who is accused of masterminding a grenade attack on a cop there and has ties to a U.S. designated terrorist organization in Pakistan. Since President Trump's inauguration on January 20th, Immigration Customs Enforcement officers have arrested 219 known or alleged terrorists, marking a 655% increase from the same period last year when 29 such arrests were made under former President Joe Biden, according to a new Homeland Security data. DOJ announces RICO charges. I love RICO. RICO charges against 27 alleged Venezuelan gang members. The reason why I like RICO, the damages for RICO are treble, meaning that if you get found guilty of a RICO violation, whatever you made in profit is returned back to the people you stole it from ×3. Goodness, that'll do an end to you. And the indictments come as part of a broader crackdown on foreign gangs and cartels by the Trump administration.
They were told it was just a structural collapse, but in actual fact it was a disintegration on a molecular level. Watch this.
The buildings turned to dust before they even reached the ground. You can actually see this happening. You can watch any of the videos from the news channels. They all show the same thing.
We thought we knew what we saw.
A plane hitting the building should not turn the buildings into dust.
43,600 windows, 600,000 square feet of glass, 200,000 tons of structural steel, 5 million square feet of gypsum, 6 acres of marble, and 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, turned in good part into a cloud.
If this is true, then the owner of the Twin Towers was asked where he was on 9/11, and his response was incredibly suspicious. Watch this.
Where were you on September 11th?
I was home.
If he had nothing to hide, why did he hesitate? Because
questions you're not allowed to ask. Why did the owner of the World Trade Center get maximum insurance against terrorist attacks 6 weeks prior to September 11th? Why did the owner have breakfast in the towers every morning except for September 11th? The day before September 11th, Rumsfeld gave a press conference where he talked about trillions of dollars missing.
Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Why was CNN already there before the attacks with a camera crew ready to film? Why was there an unidentified group of short cells purchased against airline companies right before the attacks? Why was every passenger incinerated in the explosion, but the terrorist passport somehow survived? Why was a report published a year before 9/11 by George W. Bush's administration saying they needed to aggressively expand military power worldwide, but they need a catalyzing Pearl Harbor level event in order to gain public support?
Some of those cuts on the larger chunks of the structure, called candlesticks, were made by iron workers during the removal operations. But cut columns were noticed on the very evening of September 11, far before the removal operations had started.
This is the first day in a pile. Actually, it was on the 11th. It was 8 o'clock at night, and we had a hunt for iron workers. But meanwhile, there was tons and tons of beams that were cut with no acetylene to be had, nor iron workers to do the work. It's just physically not possible to cut that much steel in that amount of time, especially with no one to operate the equipment. It just didn't add up.
When asked about the presence of columns cut at a 45-degree angle, Danilo Coppe, Italy's foremost expert in controlled demolitions, stated, "I'll confess, this is extremely curious from a technical point of view, as this is a very similar result to the one obtained with cutting charges." Once the smoke had settled and the recovery work commenced, more evidence pointing at controlled demolitions started to emerge. One example are the supporting columns cut at a 45-degree angle that were noticed sticking out of the ground. This kind of cut is typical of controlled demolitions and is obtained by placing linear charges on the columns at a 45-degree angle.
Now this is a linear shaped charge, and it's wired in with the dynamite. When it cuts, it'll cut this column right on this angle, and then this piece will be deflected and displaced in that direction.
In the last 24 hours, two pillars of global influence have fallen. Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, and Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, gone. Just like that. No speculation, no spin, just fact. One resigned, one passed. Both considered architects of the modern globalist agenda. Both gone in a day. You won't see headlines connecting these two events. The mainstream will call it coincidence, but people are watching. People are feeling the shift. And let's be clear, this wasn't expected. Back in May of 2024, Klaus Schwab said he would remain at the helm of the WEF until at least 2027. He was adamant. The transition must be gradual, he said, and yet, just months later, he's gone, abruptly, quietly. These aren't just resignations or deaths. These are symbols of an era that may be ending. An era defined by control, centralization, ideology masked as inevitability. Globalism demands that nations surrender their independence to a global authority, political, financial, even spiritual. It asks you to trade we the people for they, the elite. That's not progress. That's the antithesis of the American experiment. Because the Declaration of Independence wasn't a suggestion, it was a rejection of exactly this kind of power structure. Sovereignty, freedom, self-rule. That's what's on the line. So what's happening here? Are the globalist foundations being dismantled? Is someone, some force, moving pieces off the board? We don't pretend to know the full picture, but we know this. Power doesn't give up without a reason. And when power does shift, it rarely does so with headlines. It happens in silence, in symbolism, in perfect timing. Watch closely, because the world just changed, and most people haven't even noticed yet.